Welcome back. This is your host Siris King. This is gonna be an ATR video. Feels like I haven't done that in a while. It's funny. On one level, it feels like I haven't done it in a while, but then it feels like this channel has become that. so maybe what that means is I don't really do as much. I don't do as much videos in this channel as I should, and I keep saying. I have said that many times. And hey, look, I got a little better, right? I mean, I got a little better. Like there's like a video every 3 months, so try to do once a month. But this was more inspired because the African traditional religions or the ATR systems, whatever you want to call that, obviously has been a big influence in my life. And, there's so many different systems, right? Because Africa is a huge continent. Africa first of all, it's a continent, right? It's not a country, it's a continent, and it's huge. And even if it wasn't huge, it's also a place with the most diversity. People don't really realize that. When you are studying, and because, when I look at videos on YouTube, Palo videos, Voodoo videos, I don't really look at the Kemetic videos as much, but sometimes I look at the Kemetic videos because I look at them a little bit, but I don't really look at them as much. But if you wanted to talk about Kemetic videos, videos on Ifa, there's not as much Obeah videos as I would like on YouTube, but the few Obeah videos that exist. And it's interesting because when I sit and look, sometimes it's sad in the sense because there's several problems with how a lot of information is being displayed, right, or taught. Because spirituality is a lifestyle. So it's a lifestyle that is intertwined with your culture, with your music, with how you see yourself, with how you see the world. And when you look at it from that point of view, you can't just be like, all right, I don't understand the conditions that, let's say, created voodoo, and I go to Haiti and try to learn voodoo, or I go to New Orleans and try to learn voodoo. You could do it, but you have to learn the culture. You have to study the conditions that gave birth to that system, or else you're just, I don't know. I don't want to say become parasitic, but whatever you learn is just going to be a reflection of what truly is, and then you go and start teaching it, and then that's where the problem comes in, right? And that's with any ATR system, whether it's Ifa, or Lukumi, Palo, any one of them. Obeah. I wish there was more people in this part of the world doing Sangoma, whoever, whichever one it is, right? That's a big problem. And it's not a problem that's easy solvable because when I see how the videos are this, because here's the problem. Okay, here's the thing. When you deal with Africa, right? It's a place of tribes, right? Many people, many tribes, the most diverse country, the most diverse continent in the world. When I say the most diverse continent, what does that mean? If you look at Asia, who's the indigenous cultures of Asia? The way people perceive it, right? The way people perceive it, you have, in America, we say Asian for people of East Asian descent, right? Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, but technically Indians are Asians too. But let's say you have East Asians, right? You got Indians, right? And remember, Asia is the biggest country in the world. Oh, country, God. See, some people are influencing me. The biggest continent in the world, right? So you got Indians, you have East Asians, that's two. And then a lot of Eastern Europe is part of Asia too as well. You could even say Europe is really Asia, to be honest. But that's a whole nother story. So then you could even have the white race, right? You have three races that's normally associated with Asia, right? South America you can't count because it's a mix of different people coming from other places. And remember, the Americas was the last continent, settled. But you know what? Let's just put the Americas. Both North America and South America, when we say who is indigenous to North America and South America, we usually say Native Americans, Amerindians, right? So when you look at Europe, the three races, not even Europe, sorry. When you look at Asia, the three races that the Asian continent generated, I just said. When you look at North and South America, it generated one race, right? So meaning there's other people there now. Meaning if I go and say there's a Nigerian living in China, okay, he's living in China or she's living in China, but they weren't from China originally, right? So Asia is the biggest and it has three, right? The Americas, North and South, two continents, have one. Australia, Aborigines, one. You go to Africa. This is the difference. You go to Africa. Africa most people don't realize this. The sub-Saharan African, right, from west, central, south, and east, is one type of, is considered one race, right? Then you also have the more Kushite or Neolithic or Indus, or you could say East African race, right? They're black, they're both black, but genetically there's differences, right? So this is the diversity I'm talking about, where you go to East Africa and you go to West Africa, and there's more diversity genetically between those two than Europe and Asia. So Europe and Asia are close to each other than West Africa and East Africa. So West and East, that's two different races. The Pygmies, the Bushmen in South Africa, two other races. Those are four races that people will visually look and say black, but genetically very diverse from each other. Then you have the North African race, right, the Berbers, who they are, in terms of racially, white, but they're indigenous to North Africa, so they're indigenous to Africa. So that's 5, right? That's 5. And even if, because I know how people think, the 4 I just said, people will say, well, they all look black. Okay, even if I said that, even if I put all 4 as black, right, you have 1. So I go from 4 to 1. That's 1. The North African group, right, is indigenous to Africa. They didn't come from anywhere else. So that's Africans, indigenous Caucasians. That's 2, right? That's 2. Then when you actually go to Madagascar and you go to, because first of all, I'm doing this without pretending that every race didn't come from Africa, right? So all the races that you see, descendants or ancestors were in Africa and they left. But I'm pretending that's not the case. I'm just going by right now. You know, when they go to, let's say, if they went to another continent and they claim that continent, I'm going to pretend the continent gave birth to them. I'm just doing this for a reason, right? So the black race, North African race, that's 2. And then you also have the races, the groups in the East African islands like Madagascar, right? That over there you actually see people of indigenous Indian and the races that are closest to East Asian. I don't like to say Oriental, but I'm good. But I don't know what else to say, because in America they call Asians East Asians, they call Asians, they call Indians Indians, right? But you also have the East Asian group in Madagascar, who's there naturally. You have the Indian group, right, who's there in Madagascar naturally. Indian, Hindu Indian, I'm talking about East Indian, right? So all of a sudden, Madagascar gives birth to those 2, right? Or not that they gave birth to those 2 in terms of every Asian is from Madagascar, but just that's indigenous to them, right? So you got the East Asian, Indian from Madagascar, Madagascar part of Africa, that's 2. The North African races, that's 3. The black race, that's 4, right? So right off the bat, Asia had 3, and then Africa got 4, and that's nobody else is even close. Europe produces 1, the Caucasian race. North and South America produce 1. Australia produced 1, the Aboriginal race. And then, for Madagascar again, some Austronesian races that you see in Madagascar is an awesome place. Madagascar is actually Africa's secret weapon, right? And from Madagascar, you then have Austronesian peoples, or peoples that you could say are related to the Aboriginal or Polynesian people or Melanesian people there as well. So that's 5. That's 5. So 5 versus 3 from Asia versus 1 from Europe versus 1 from Australia versus 1 from North America versus 1 from South America. And that's 5. And I'm pretending that there's actually 4 subgroups within black people going from 5 to 9. Because when you deal with genetics and history and DNA, that's important. If I add that, if I do that, those 4 different tribes of blacks, that goes from 5 to 9. Asia's 3, Australia's 1, North America's 1, South America's 1. That's just real talk. Is that about superior? No, because that's going to change your spiritual system significantly. Significantly, it's going to change your spiritual system. So you crazy? And when that happens, then you talk about the different tribes because they're so different. So when we look at stuff and we would just say Nigeria, Benin, Togo. But you don't understand that there's Yoruba and Benin They might call them Anas, right? There's Yorubas in Benin. There's also Fauna everywhere in Nigeria. There's also Fauna and what? Fauna peoples in Ghana. Half of them might be that. And then the Ashanti groups or the Kan groups might be the other half. Right? And so when you say Ghana, then there's a few Yoruba in Ghana. So you could be a Yoruba person from Ghana just as well as a Yoruba person from Nigeria. Versus well, a Yoruba person from Benin. It's tribal. Each tribe has their own spiritual interpretation. That's very important to understand. And so then, this is before the slave trade. Every culture has their own interpretation, right? So when I brought up all these different variations of populations within Africa, that is the most by far, either 5 to 1 in most continents, or 9 to 1. You're talking about 5 to 9 times more diversity in that, right? So people get so focused on Egypt, but the whole continent was bustling with spirituality. And that's extremely important because before the slave trade, you probably mixed with your tribe. That was it, right? And I'm not even counting the fact that, and this is why I say a lot of people don't do videos justice, because I don't want to talk about Gnosticism for now, but in the Judaism and in Islam, Judaism and Islam did not come to Africa with slavery. Christianity did. So it goes the various ATRs. 1, probably Judaism 2, but it could be Islam 2 and Judaism 3. But Judaism, Islam is hard to say which one came first. But I'm going to just say, go out, let me say Judaism 2nd because of the Ethiopian connection. Then Islam 3rd. They were there before slavery. Yes, when Arabs conquered certain parts of Africa, it increased the number of Muslims, but Islam was there before slavery. So Christianity is really the religion that's totally because of slavery. And I'm not saying Christianity is bad, but that's just the reality of it. So when you see, and I'm not talking about them because this is about ATRs, but when you see certain groups say they're Israelites or they're Moors or the original black culture was Islam, the way they present information is wrong. No, the original, the ATRs are by far the first, but it is some truth. So then sometimes when certain groups say, when they push the African traditional religions or some other people in America, Kemetic sciences, they treat Islam and Judaism as alien religions. Islam and Judaism are not alien religions. Christianity is the alien religion. But I do admit that Judaism and Islam, if you go about pre-slavery, whether you're talking about European slavery or African slavery, not African, sorry, the European slave trade or the Arab slave trade was different, but they're not alien to the continent. Because the continent literally has 9 different significant groups, where everyone else has 3 and 1, and honestly, even the ones that even the population that other continents had once lived in Africa. So the spirituality, this has to be understood before you start talking about ATRs or which system should I practice, because then that leads me to this point. When you start talking about what systems should you practice, before the slave trade, you probably were one tribe. And I'm not even talking about being mixed with Native American. I'm not even talking about being mixed with white. We just come from the African point of view right now. Right? You had basically one tribe. Now most people are mixes if you are a small mix, you might be two groups. Some people are 3s, 4s. Some people are 5 different mixes of different tribes, ranging from as far as Madagascar to as close as Nigeria and Benin and Ghana. So then you say, well, what religion should I be practicing? What spiritual system should I be practicing then? Because you're a mixture of 4 or 5 different groups. And see, the answer is not easy. Because then, what's left in the new world for most people? Because to be fair, there's certain systems like Obeah is not really religion, right? And I know a lot of people are not going to say and I'm not going to name any other ATR with this because people going to get mad. Bring up an ATR, they're going to say it's not religion, it's a way of life. Even if you really believe that, the systems that everyone has are so organized and have such structure. Magical structures are more fluid, right? In the magical structure, if I'm in ancient Africa, and this is something that hasn't been, I don't know why, but this understanding hasn't been brought to the New World. the different oceans are considered different worlds. So the Atlantic and Indian Oceans have the best relationship energetically with each other, right? The Pacific Ocean is so big, you could put the other four oceans together, and the Pacific's still bigger. The Pacific is its own animal, right? But the Atlantic Ocean is one world. The Indian Ocean is one world. So many times, actually, when you see different groups, they're usually separated by different water. And the ocean is symbolic of that. That understanding has not been translated to the New World at all, for whatever reason. And so, once you start to introduce, because there's even tribes in Africa like the Fulani and the Igbo that actually originally came from East Africa. So it's not even as simple as saying East and West. It's not. Just like there's the Bantu people. The Bantu groups are huge. And when they do with Bantu spirituality is Palo, or the Brazilian version of Palo, right, which is more Angolan spirituality, they talk so much about the Bantu peoples. But the Bantu peoples are huge. They're in the center. Right? Congo or Angola is not the origin. Their origin is Cameroon. Right? And so from that point, they're in the center. And when they're in the center, what happened? They went south, they went east. So you have Bantu peoples, and then they had their own particular slave trade. So when they had their own particular slave trade, what happened? At that point, the Arab slave trade, they went to Arabia. They went as far as India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, as far as Georgia, not the state, the country. They went as far as there, Iran, Turkey. That's all the same soul group. On a totally different continent, totally different ocean. And so when you deal with Bantu peoples have influences from east and west. So it's not as simple as even saying east and west. Just if you mix your, and I'm just talking about from your black side. I'm not even talking about from your Native American side yet, or from your white side. But if you go from your black side and mix your four different groups, it's not as simple as being like, well, this is, well, you're this. Because some people are lucky. Some people might say, well, how about if I'm more of a mix? So if I do a DNA test and I'm 50% Ghana, 20% Congo, and etc., then you might be a mix of a races, right? Should I do that? Well, logically, yes. Logically, I can't say no. But from what I understand, when you deal with the astral in general and ancestors, is that sometimes it's not as simple as saying which ancestor is the most numerous, because they may not be the most influential. And the reason why I brought up the religion is because even if these systems don't want to pretend they're not a religion, they are. They have an organized structure and they don't change, right? Meaning, if I say I'm doing Obeah, any Obeah man knows this, right? If I'm in a different ocean, if I'm in Australia, I'm gonna have to tweak my science. That's why Obeah is called the science. I'm going to have to tweak that science for that ocean, for that landmass, for those spirits. I can't just be like, well, I did this in Jamaica, Trinidad, or in Suriname, right? And I'm going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to do this in Australia. I'm going to have to tweak it. If you're practicing the science or magic, you know that. If you're practicing religion, where you say, no, this person gets this offering on Monday, and this person gets this offering on Wednesday, then that's religion. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't be doing that, but it's not flexible. So the answer is not easy. So when we say, which which system should I be practicing, that is not an easy thing to actually tell somebody. Because if you were doing magic, naturally, you would be more experimental, and you would kind of know automatically which systems you kind of, you would kind of know which systems you kind of vibe with, or not even your systems, but also a group of spirits, because you're experimenting. And that doesn't mean you should experiment, because like I said, if you're doing magic and you did the work, the average person has not done the work. The average person doesn't have that defense around them. This is particularly why when people come to me, I don't push ATRs. I might make a video, and I might say, oh, you want to know about this is this. But if you go to anybody and say, if you come to me, you email me, what should you practice? I give you tarot, I give you hermeticism, I give you Kabbalah. I'm like, look, man, the answer, Like, it's too much red tape to go and see which system you should be practicing. If you want to know information about that, here this is. But if you tell me what should I practice, I give you the Hermetic Kabbalah stuff. Why? Because it's a mess trying to navigate through all those different groups, and then even if you say, oh, I'm going to do Palo, I'm going to do Vodun, I'm going to do Ifa, even if you do that, right? In the end, they're still they're so rigid. And if you have 4 or 5 different groups, so if I come in and say let's just say for instance, I'm not, but let's say for instance I say I'm 50% Bantu, which is Congo, I'm 25% Yoruba, and I'm 25% whatever. I'm gonna split it. 12% Fon and Ewe, and then 12% from Senegal. I'm like I don't know, Wolofu, right? Cool. So that somebody says, well, you're 50%. Practice the ones at 50%. Sometimes it's not that easy. Because sometimes that 12% of ancestors on the other side is the ones running shit. That's why I said a lot of this chaos is because people do not want to handle those systems the way they're supposed to be, meaning understand the history, understand the culture before you start calling on anything. Get the mind of the tribe, of the group first, especially if you're coming from portions that were not even, so like meaning if a person's in Haiti, on Cuba, on Jamaica, on Trinidad, or Suriname, or in Brazil, and in those places people have a history of doing that, that's actually easier to run to them if you're from that region and say, okay, I want to get initiated, I want to do this, I want to do that. That's easier. If you're coming from America and you're coming from a place where you're not even used to that culture, you should move much slower, period. And I think the people in those places I just said should move slower too, because what ends up happening is they get a false sense of confidence that they know more than what they really do know, and that's just the reality of it. That's why people come to me. Shoot, I'll freaking push you to yoga quicker than some of these other systems. Some people don't like that, but it's because of the way it's practiced at this point. It's a lot of chaos because most people asking these questions don't even realize they're a combination of 4 different tribes. Like some people 2, some people 1, but for the most part 3, 4, 5 different tribes. Not even including Native American, not including Caucasian. Not even including those things. And if you include that, it's even more chaos. Because sometimes then we say, well, you know, we then bring in human shit. So we'd be like, okay, well in America, if I'm black and white, that means I'm black. That don't mean nothing to the spiritual world. Doesn't mean anything. So that's why, in many ways, there is no easy answer to say which African system should I be practicing. Because half the people, when they ask that question, the Akan groups, the Dahomey groups, the Yoruba groups, just being honest, were some of the biggest pushers of slaves at one time. So most people don't even realize that greatly affected the system, and that's why in some of those systems they have stories of some people, some of those spirits coming to this part of the world because they had to fix their own. I mean, karma, the way karma is in Africa is not the way karma is in India. Some people would even use that word, but let me just use that word for now. Their own karma, right? And there's other systems that people don't even. That's why I said Sangoma is that ish. But there's other systems that exist that people don't even know about. Then there's other systems that we're not in Africa, but we're interpretations of systems that will recreate this part of the world, like Palo and Obeah. So my thing is, no one has all the answers. But anything I just said here can't really be disputed, if you're being honest. You want to talk about how great Africa is, well, understand the diversity, and understand because of the diversity, the spirituality from that continent has so many different paths. And if you just think African spirituality is Odisha worship, Vodun, and Palo, well, or even better in America, Kemetic, literally, right? The system most in the north. I'm like, hey man, I'm a sub-Sahara guy, period. But the systems most in the north, some people, they focus on that. And if you are one of those, if that's you, you need to go back and do a little bit more studying. And I would suggest doing more studying before you start calling any spirits. And if you're going from one reading to the next reading, be cautious of that too, because your teacher probably don't know that. So, Siris King, till next time, peace.